I am so excited to be talking to you about law school admissions interviews today. Those interviews are part of the application process. The committee's going to look at those. They're going to have notes if they aren't attending them themselves. So you really want to make sure that you're making the very, very best impression that you can. If you haven't seen any of my videos before, or this is the first time that you are seeing me on your computer screen, my name is Alice. I'm one of the Associate Law School Consultants with Montgomery Admissions Consulting. I'm probably going to go over like the 3 real big mistakes that folks typically make and how you can avoid them. If you have any questions, if you want me to recover something, let me know in the comments. And if you think this is helpful at the end, I'd love for you to subscribe, to like it, to share it with a friend. We keep these afterwards, so if you can't catch it right now, you'll have the chance later on. All right, so let's get started. The good news is, if you have ever interviewed for a job, admissions interviews aren't significantly different. It's still usually the same kind of setup. You and some folks that you need to chat to, maybe answer some questions from, a room with probably a conference table or something like that, or in this day and age, Zoom or Teams or Google Meet or whatever the platform that the school is using. They may even have their own, so keep an eye on that. Sometimes those are weird. Not for lack of trying, but those home-built ones are very strange. You should really, really, really avoid this first thing. And it's good practice anyway. Your first biggest mistake that you can make is not doing your research beforehand. If you've seen any of my other videos, there's also a super helpful way to get started. You've got everything you need to do this research. You just actually have to take the time to do it. The very first thing that I'm going to tell you to do is read the directions. These folks that are setting up these interviews are not just going to leave you out there on your own. They're going to tell you exactly what you need to do, exactly where to go, exactly what to prepare, exactly what you need to be thinking about. They may not give you actual questions, but you will have a pretty good idea of what it is you're supposed to be doing before you can even get started. You've got a guide. They wrote it and they're going to send it to you. The other thing that falls under doing your research, or not doing your research, is not actually looking up what it is that you are interviewing with. Is it an alumni panel? Is it the admissions committee? Is it just some random administrator for the school? Are there students involved? Is there a particular point or focus for the interview? Not a ton of law schools do interview programs, but they do run them a bit differently. And often, while the overall arching point may be to find out more information about you as an applicant, there's also sometimes something else going on. Whether it is trying to figure out if you'd be a good candidate for a scholarship, or they are making sure that you're really interested in the school, or it's this one I don't think happens very often, but it can sometimes be that sort of last chance to save yourself if the committee's on the line. You may, on paper, be all right, but if you can rock an interview, that may help you a ton when it comes time for the committee to make their final decision. The other thing that you want to do is make sure that you're researching the school. Particularly if you're interviewing at more than one place, make sure you're saying the right things to the right people. Don't talk about a clinic that another school has. Make a spreadsheet, make notes, do whatever works for you, but make sure that you're talking to the people about the things they actually know about. The other thing that is going to be helpful here is making sure that you know your resume. I know that sounds silly, you wrote it, they're things you did, but, and I have seen this happen, if you don't remember the dates, don't remember the name of a job title, don't remember the name of a place you worked, don't remember some kind of interest, if you were getting a little generous with that last section of your resume where you put down cool stuff, understand that you may be asked about that cool stuff. And if it is not totally true, problems. Make sure you know your resume. I talked about this a little at the top, and I'm going to reiterate. If it is in person, figure out where you're going. Make sure you have the address, make sure you know what floor. Honestly, check on the parking situation. So it wasn't a law school admissions interview, but I was a victim of this when I applied for one of my very first jobs after law school. I thought I was ready to go. I'd taken a quick peek at a map, didn't really look at anything else, and I was on a completely unfamiliar college campus, and I ended up being late for my interview because I could not figure out where it is I was supposed to park to get to the building that I was going to. Thankfully, the folks I was interviewing with were very kind, and I was able to call in as I'm frantically driving around campus trying to figure out where I'm supposed to be. And even though we got a little bit late of a start, at the end of it, they still liked me enough to hire me. But don't take that as what's always going to happen. Punctuality is very important. And if you haven't figured out where it is you're going, what that parking situation looks like, all of that stuff, you are not doing yourself any favors. Particularly, you'll find out when you get to law school, we like punctuality a lot. They're going to drive that into you because courts, they're not going to wait on you. If you miss a filing deadline, it's done. So figure out where you're going. The last piece of the research, and this one is one of those things that's going to just set you a little above. Figure out who it is that you're interviewing with. I talked a little bit about there being a lot of different groups that may sit in on the interview process that may be part of the interview process for each school. Alumni, professors, the admissions committee members, the admissions office members, the dean. Who knows? Sometimes current students even. Some schools may not give you this information, but if you have that, read up on who you're talking about, or talking to rather. They have something interesting to you, if they've done scholarship that applies to you, if they're associated with a club or a clinic or something like that, if there's a student and their leadership in an organization that you're interested in, look that up. It is going to make you sound so prepared when you can walk right in and you've got the Student Bar Association president and a professor that works in the Innocence Project clinic. And those are both things that you're interested in. You walk in, sit down. As you're talking to them, you weave in the fact that you know that's what they do and that you're so excited that they're the ones that are interviewing you because interests align so well and that you're so excited to be able to be part of the Innocence Project clinic, or that you are really excited to be part of Student Bar Association. All of those things are going to make it so much better. And if you don't do them, it's not going to go great. So, first big mistake, not doing your research. The next thing sounds very similar, but it is not preparing for your interview. There are some pretty typical questions that would come up in a law school admissions interview. Why do you want to go to law school? I know that this has come up in your personal statement, and they will very likely have read your application by the time they are interviewing you. Be able to tell them that anyway. Is there a particular club? Or, like I said, a clinical experience, something along those lines at the school that you are very excited about? Where is it you'd like to work your first summer? What has prepared you for this? Can you tell us about fill in the blank piece of something that has shown up in one of your essays? Usually I don't think you're going to bring up anything that would come up in a disclosure or an addenda, but be prepared if they do ask something about that. You have everything you need to work on this. You have your application, you know yourself. If you are struggling because you haven't thought through answers to these questions, it's gonna not look great. The other thing that you wanna make sure that you can do is that you can answer those questions relatively quickly. Most of the time, these interviews aren't much longer than 30 minutes or an hour, and it goes by really quick. So if when they say, why is it you wanna come to law school? And you have a 40-minute soapboxy situation, it's not great either. Elevator pitch. Make sure that's the kind of length we're working with. Just the highlights. If they have further questions about something that you bring up, they can ask. If you are interviewing over the internet, like we're doing right now, make sure that your tech works. I don't know how often I have thought I've prepared, I thought I've done everything, and I forget to check something. And I am 2 minutes away from starting an event, starting a live, and something doesn't work the way it's supposed to, or something needs an update. Check out what you're working with as far as your tech goes. Make sure that it all works. Make sure that your computer can handle it. Make sure that you've got a quiet place. I spent a lot of time putting together what you see behind me. It is ideally not super distracting. It's got things that are important to me. And it's not just a blank wall. There is nothing worse than being all excited, getting ready to pop on, talk to all these folks. You've done everything else, you're ready to go, and you can't log into the system because you were supposed to create a login before. Or there is some weird video setting. Save yourself that trouble. Check it out beforehand. They will give you a chance to make sure it works, so take advantage. The last thing here, and I would hope that you carry this into every type of interview that you are going to be part of from pretty much here on out, make sure that you have prepared at least 3 or 4 questions to ask them. I can count on probably one hand the number of interviews that I have had in my entire life that did not end with my interview asking me, so do you have any questions for us? Even if you don't think you do, answering no in that sense is a mistake. They can be general questions if you want them to be. It's probably a good time to get a little more specific if you want to ask about financial aid or scholarship things, that's an option. If you want to ask more about programs, also an option. You have a lot of things that you can touch upon, that you can pull from to make sure that you're not left sitting there kind of blank-faced. Don't be that person. Yeah, I do actually have a couple of questions for you. I'd really love to hear a little bit more about your law review. I read on your website that blah, blah, blah. Can you tell me a little bit more about how that works, particularly for first-year students? What is the first-year summer associate pool looking like? Am I gonna have a chance, if I do end up as a student here, as a first year, to get into a big firm, if that's what I'm aiming for? And obviously, if I'm qualified. Is that a chance? Do first-year students have access to clerkships? That's a state-to-state thing. I was shocked when I found out that not every law school offers clerkships to their first-year students. Make sure you are asking questions. Don't sit there silently. The last big mistake is not telling the truth. A lot of the parts of your law school application are basically on the honor system. There is a piece at the end of every application that you check to certify that everything you have provided to them is accurate to the best of your knowledge. But if you're applying to your dream school, I get the impulse to pad out the resume a little bit. Or even worse, when you get in there and someone asks, we saw in your application in the question that asks if you're applying to any other law schools that you've got a pretty long list. We'd love to know, where are we in your personal ranking system? Like, are we your first choice? Are we in the top 5? Tell us a little bit about that. Like, let us know where we are for you. It's not an out of the ordinary question. And you can be vague, that's fine. But if you sit there and tell a school that they are your number one choice and that is not true, you are setting a lot of folks up for some disappointment. It's not a good look to start out being dishonest. It's not gonna hurt my feelings as an interviewer. It's not gonna hurt anybody else in the room's feelings if we're not your top choice. That's okay. We still may be the law school that you end up at, but when we leave the interview, I don't wanna be thinking, oh yes, Alice is absolutely coming here. And that is not the case. Do not oversell how important a school is to you. I would be super thrilled to attend this law school is a perfectly fine answer. I'm really excited at all of these offerings. It means that you are one of my top choices. If that's true, one would assume that if you've taken the time out to interview, the school is probably high up on the list of schools that you are planning to attend. It's one of those ones that you want to have the choice to come to. That's awesome. Tell them that. I would love the opportunity. It's one of my favorites. For this particular reason. Extra points if you can add in some specifics about why. If something comes up and you have to reschedule an interview or something along those lines, do not lie when you reach out. If you had an emergency last minute, that's okay. Tell your interviewers that's what happened. They are humans too. They understand that emergencies come up and will likely attempt to accommodate. Don't go straight for a relative is ill. I am ill. My child is ill. There are a whole host of reasons that are real, like all of those things, honestly. We get that as interviewers. Law school is not your only priority. But don't lie. Don't embellish it. Just tell us what happened. And again, like I said, most of the time, a committee is going to try and accommodate you. If we have invited you to interview or you have signed up to interview, chances are we're interested. Now, a lot of schools will say that it does not up your chances for admission. That is true if the school has that language in there. This is just another piece of the application process. But if you're not interested in the school, there's nothing that says you have to take the interview. There are a few schools where interviews are required, so if you've gone through the trouble of putting the application together and all of that jazz, it'd be silly to stop at that point, I would think. But otherwise, there's been some commitment from both sides at this point. So starting off lying about why you couldn't make an interview is not great. Admissions offices particularly, we're pretty good at finding out information. And if it comes up that you did lie, we remember and we're going to share that with our colleagues. Now, we went through the 3 major mistakes. Not doing your research, number 1. Number 2, not preparing for the interview. Number 3, not telling the truth. Those are super important. I do have one final note, and this is a little soapbox for me. For the love of all things holy, send a follow-up. Thank somebody for the time. You do not necessarily need to send to each individual interviewer, particularly if it's a large group, but you need to send thank you notes. You need to send a follow-up. Get in the habit, it's something that you should be doing always. If you get out into the adult world, and you're looking for your next job, you made an all right impression in the hiring process up to that point, and it's you and maybe 2 other candidates. If the other 2 turn right back around and send beautiful thank you notes, things that, they bring up stuff from the interview day, they bring up things about the program, like those types of things, and you're the only one that doesn't, it's not a good look. Email is fine initially. Go the extra mile, send something on paper. If you're not totally sure where to send it, just send it to the school. Ideally, probably care of admissions office. They'll figure out where it goes. But you don't have to send 12. I know some of my students from when I was working in law schools had this thing down to an art. They had thank you cards pre-addressed and ready to be filled in. And as soon as they were finished with an interview, they would sit down, take 3 minutes, and write it out. So then they didn't have to worry about it. They could drop it in the mail. Honestly, we took mail from the law school all the time. So if I was in the building as a student and something needed mailed that was sort of related to what we were doing at the law school and I had the stamp on it, I could drop it in the mail bin in the front office. I didn't even have to worry about getting it to my own mailbox. Like I said, it's a good habit for the rest of your life. It's going to serve you really well. We have covered some of the big mistakes, how to avoid them, one quick helpful tip for everything else. For those of you that are getting ready to go into the application process and you're applying to schools that interview, make sure you take this to heart. You are all going to be excellent attorneys. If you're paying attention to the things that we do, you're investing more time than the average bear, and it's going to help you in the long run. So like I said at the beginning, if this was super helpful, if you think it may help a friend, a family member, a random person that has given you the indication they want to go to law school, pass it along. We are happy to help. Get in touch. Check out our website at montgomeryadmissionsconsulting.com. And I cannot wait to see you next time.